And that's the reason why we're here today to discuss it and why it's important, and of course how it's related to the existing work of UNEP, particularly through the Nairobi Convention, which falls under the Regional Seas Program. So some of the key components of the resolution, which focuses on strengthening oceans and seas governance to tackle the triple planetary crisis of climate change, marine biodiversity loss, and pollution. Some of the key components or areas which it seeks to address includes it wants to improve the health, productivity, sustainable use, and resilience of ocean and its ecosystems. It also seeks to adopt, ratify, and implement the relevant regional seas conventions, protocols, and action plans for the protection and development of the marine and coastal environment. And it seeks to support the signing and ratification of the BBNG, which many of you should have been familiar with by now, which is the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement. It also seeks to support the full and effective implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. That is something that is very big, which is the Montreal Biodiversity Framework, which was agreed upon in Montreal. It also seeks to the resolution also seeks to support the increased level of ambition of the 2023 International Maritime Organization strategy and reduction of GHG emissions from ships to advance decarbonization. Continue by looking at other key components, which includes to support the ongoing process to develop a legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Another area which it seeks to cover, which is to encourage the secretariats of the regional seas conventions and action plans to support their contracting parties. It also seeks to strengthen legal frameworks and implement investigation and prosecution activities to tackle marine pollution effectively. It also seeks to ensure that the technologies and operational practices of deep seabed mining do not cause harmful effects on the marine environment and biodiversity. It seeks to strengthen the capacity of, in particular, small island developing states and the least developed countries. And last but not least, it seeks to strengthen science policy interface. And of course, science policy interface, we would have spoken about many of those, which includes IPBES, the IPCC, and of course, we're now trying to introduce a new science policy panel, which seeks to address chemicals and waste. So this discussion, of course, is very important to us. We have our guest here who will go much more deeper into conversation as to why this resolution is important, and of course why it's important to the work of UNEP and how they are interlinked, particularly the Regional Seas Program, and of course the resolution on ocean and science governance. So we're now going into the aspect of the conversation where we're having more like a panel discussion, and I think I want us to hear from every single person here, particularly I'm from the Caribbean, where we have the Cartagena Convention, which falls under the Regional Seas Program. Many of you are here from Africa, which would fall under the Nairobi Convention, and there are several other conventions which many of you may not be aware of, but they contribute some way to address land degradation, pollution. This is a pollution and in our region now, oil spill. Particularly in Joshua's country, there's a very big oil spill that's happening in his country right now. And so it's, the conversation is relevant, but if you're not so much aware of the situations, this is an opportunity for you to get to know the conventions and how we seek to, engage in them. So we're going to turn over to the discussion with the panelists at this point. Our first question will go to the Deputy Permanent Representative of France, Mr. Clement Père. Your Excellency, we understand that France is one of the co-sponsors of the resolution. France has also been a supporter of ocean conservation, particularly one of the biggest champions against deep sea mining. Do you think enough is being done globally to protect our oceans and seas? If so, what gaps exist in ocean governance generally, and why this resolution is important to addressing those gaps?
Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the invitation of youth and children major groups. So I'm Clément Payeux, the Deputy Permanent Representative of France to UNEP. And as you rightly mentioned, France was one of the major sponsors of this resolution within the EU. So the EU has been co-tabled this resolution with Costa Rica. And why this resolution matters? We believe this resolution matters because, yes, there are gaps remaining in terms of ocean governance. Recently, we, as member states, were able to accomplish 2 milestones. The first one is the BBNJ treaty, the treaty on the ICs. Of course, it's rather complicated treaty, but to make it simple, what does the treaty do? It allows member states where there is no sovereignty in ICs, where no member states can claim any right of sovereignties to protect this marine environment. It's not because there is no sovereignty that we shouldn't protect this environment through 2 tools, mainly the marine protected areas and the environmental impact assessments. Recently, member states of the United Nations also adopted an important agreement. It's the Global Biodiversity Framework, the Kunming-Montreal Framework, which one of the goals is to protect 30% of the land and the seas by 2030. And 2030 is tomorrow. And that's why France, the EU, and Costa Rica thought it was important for UNEP to take its responsibility in implementing those 2 global frameworks, the BBNJ and the Global Biodiversity Frameworks. And how can UNEP do that? What you mentioned is correct. UNEP is is coordinating a network of 18 what we call the regional sea conventions. And they are covering almost all the ocean. There is the Cartagena Convention for the Caribbean Sea, the Nairobi Convention for the Indian Ocean. 18 of them are covering the seas and the ocean. And those conventions, we believe France have the capacity to regionally implement those global agreements. So that's one of the gaps is governance. Or we go from global to regional. That's the first aim of this resolution you presented. And we have also all other gaps. We have the overfishing problems. You know that most of the fish stocks are overfished. And of course, we need to act on this. Otherwise, we'll get more plastic in the ocean than fish by the end of the century. And then you have new activities that are developing and that may be harmful for the marine environment. I'm thinking about the deep sea mining, and France, indeed, and President Macron has been the first head of states to say, oh, before going to deep sea bed mining, before going to exploitation of the seabed, maybe we should better assess scientifically what biodiversity we get in the deep sea to make sure that we have put right measures, right regulation standards before going to exploitation of those critical minerals. And I would stop here.
I must say thank you very much to Deputy DPR Clement for going directly, looking at many of the issues. I want to see if the hands of persons in the room. How many of you are aware of the issue of deep sea mining, the industry? Just a show of hands, how many of you are aware of the impending industry, deep sea mining? Very interesting. I think we could go into an entire presentation as to why we should have a moratorium on deep seabed mining, or why should we not support deep seabed mining? But that's a conversation that we can have, and you'll see for those who will be joining the discussions on the Ocean and Seas Governance Resolution, you will see different proposition or proposals on that topic in this coming week. So you should follow me as a contact point, and I'll be supporting you through the entire week. But thank you very much. I'll come back to you, Deputy PR Clement. I'm going over to you now, Miss Agnes Muriuki from the Nairobi Convention Secretariat, particularly UNEP. Your background in ocean sciences is as vast and deep as the oceans themselves. You have knowledge on the Regional Seas Program. Can you tell us some of its successes in regards to the Nairobi Convention? And in your opinion, how can youth engagement be strengthened in the Regional Seas Program?
Okay, thank you very much, Mario. Well, as you heard, my name is Agnes Mukami. I'm a program assistant from Nairobi Convention, UNEP. And in terms of that question, the success of the regional seas, especially Nairobi Convention, in terms of youth engagement, I will term it as no. Sorry. Am I clearer now? Thank you. Well, my name is Agnes Mukami from Nairobi Convention, UNEP unit. So in the question that you've asked on the successes of regional seas, especially in the Nairobi Convention, I would mention that the Nairobi Convention is able to carry out different programs in the WEA region, and with different funding from JEF, from the Swedish government, and in partnership with organizations like the WIOMSA, Nature Conservancy, WWF, IUCN, we have very many partnerships. But in the context of the youth, the success we have had is that we have ensured that the youth are participating in some of the things that we are doing. We have had recently, in the previous 2 years, we have had trainings, capacity building on ocean governance for men separately and for women separately. And these participants come from the government, but we ensure that they are coming from a range of the youth to the old to give the youth a chance to learn on what is happening in the ocean governance. And also in marine spatial planning, well, it's actually more dominated by the youth, you know, because when you look at the old, most of them will be happy to go to the ocean and outline this is the area where demarcating physically. Well, the youth, because of they have gone to school, they have also be able to have their phones, they can be able to put the coordinate in the GPS and they go to the ocean and they outline these areas. So I would say in the marine spatial planning actually is more dominated by the youth than the old. And well, also in other protocols like the mapping of the ocean, we also had success with the youth engagement. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Agnes. I think it's very important to point out that the ocean and seas governance in general is very, very important. And I'm very happy that, you know, France, Costa Rica, through the EU and through the European Union, decided to sponsor this resolution. If you notice, every single conversation now involves the triple planetary crises. And we can literally link the ocean directly to each and every one of them, whether it be biodiversity loss through marine biodiversity loss or pollution or climate change. There's a linkage between every single thing. And this is the reason why when someone says to me, okay, I'm a climate activist, but they don't know much about the ocean, it's, you know, it's an issue for me because the ocean is the largest.
And this is the background for the doubling energy efficiency rate improvements set by the COP28 declaration. So what happened at COP28? So COP, again, is the Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Happened in Dubai last year. You've probably heard about it. There was a global renewables and energy efficiency pledge. In this pledge, governments, so member states, they pledged to triple renewables and double the rate of energy efficiency gains. So how do you actually improve the energy efficiency of our economy? There are a number of ways. First is using more electricity. So that means instead of using gasoline to power your vehicles, you could use electricity because electric motors are far more efficient at turning energy into motion. Another one is retrofitting buildings. So buildings that leak less energy, require less energy to cool down or to heat up, are a good way to save energy. And of course, having better cars, using electrification and using smaller vehicles. However, the second part of that, using smaller vehicles, is not really happening across the world. So in industry, we can look at how much we are able to output per unit of energy that we consume. So that refers to processes like production of cement, steel, and chemicals, glass, all very energy intensive processes where we try to use less energy if we can. Also appliances like LEDs and refrigerators. So LEDs are about 20 times more efficient than incandescent light bulbs. So that's a very good way to save energy and get the same amount of light that illuminates your world. And the final thing here is consumers making active changes to their lives, like limiting heating to 19 to 20 degrees Celsius, instead of turning the heat up to 30 degrees when it gets cold. So why is this important? If we are to meet 2050 net zero targets, by 2030, meeting the goal of 4% energy efficiency gains is going to deliver nearly 50% of all emission savings. Just think about it. It's not hydrogen, it's not biofuels. Its energy efficiency savings are going to be half of what we need to get to net zero by 2050 on this pathway. And wind and solar are a further 4 gigatons of abatement potential, or about 25%. So between doubling energy efficiency gains and tripling renewables, we are delivering 75 to 80% of carbon abatement targets that we require by 2030 to be on track for 2050 net zero. Is that impressive? I think so. And just zooming in a bit into the final part of the technologies that I discussed earlier about cooling and heating, is the world getting warmer or cooler? Staying the same, warmer or cooler? It's getting warmer. It's global warming, right? So on average, it's getting a lot warmer. But in the extreme parts of the world, in extreme weather patterns, you are having very, very cold places like blizzards that are far more prevalent, far more damaging than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. So what this means is that the amount of cooling services that you require, or heating services, and this is measured in what we call heating or cooling degree days, so HTDs or CDDs, this is increasing due to the impacts of climate change. So in places like India and Sub-Saharan Africa, you are seeing increased demand for air conditioning as the population increases and it gets warmer and people have to acclimate to urban regions. And in the northern parts, people are using more heating and also more cooling during the summer seasons. So you can see how rapidly we expect the amount of cooling services to increase over the coming years. And this is going to be an unsustainable way of meeting our energy service requirements. One of the key solutions to this, instead of using gas boilers or air conditioners all the time, is a technology called heat pumps. And heat pumps are like air conditioners that work in reverse. They pump heat where there is more of it. And these are far more efficient than gas boilers. So again, a point about efficiency, we are going from about 80% efficiency in gas boilers that heat up air or water to 350 to 450% efficiency in heat pumps. That's pretty good. But on the flip side of it, what we see is that these heat pumps use what we call hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs. These are chemicals that contain hydrogen, carbon, and fluorine atoms in the molecule. And these are incredibly damaging to the ozone layer, as well as having a very, very high global warming potential. So global warming potential is equivalent to a multiple of carbon dioxide. So when we see GWP of 2000, that means over a specified time frame, it is 2000 times more damaging than carbon dioxide when it comes to the potential to cause radiative forcing that heats up the Earth. So thanks to programs like the Montreal Protocol, the Kyoto Protocol, we have gone from more damaging chemicals, refrigerants, to less damaging ones. We've gone from chlorofluorocarbons to hydrochlorofluorocarbons to hydrofluorocarbons, and now we're at the era of hydrofluoroolefins. So we have gone from worse to slightly better. But the thing is that we are not entirely there yet. And the increase in the amount of services we need means that we will leak far more of it into the atmosphere than we would have if we didn't need more air conditioners, more heat pumps. So that's the amount of emissions from all of these, like cooling refrigerants that we expect in the next well, I guess the next century, the 2100. And what you see is you see a very, very steep increase in the amount of coolant that is leaked to the atmosphere. But the goal of using low global warming potential alternatives to these HFCs and HCFCs is that the overall impact, despite the high quantities of chemicals that may be leaked, is likely to be lower. So that is the intended outcome behind the Montreal Protocol, behind the Kigali Amendment, and that is the key discussion that the excellent colleagues beside me will be having today. And again, a point about the financial impacts of this. The benefits of using less damaging refrigerants is estimated at about $37 trillion over the entire asset lifetime. And these are quantified not just in global warming or damage to the environment, but also in benefits to human health and having like less land degradation and water pollution as well. I'll end my presentation there and back over to you, Jana.
Thank you, Gyuben. Thank you for an amazing presentation, very technical. I hope that everyone was able to grasp all the main points that we have within this presentation, and we will be moving forward to our panel discussion. If we can share the screen. In the meantime, along with our global coordinator for CYMG, we have our two distinguished panelists, Judy Ngungi and Maud Barthelo Martinez. Maud is a legal and compliance officer at the UNEP Ozone Secretariat with expertise in international environmental law and MEAs. She works on the implementation and compliance issues related to the Montreal Protocol and its Kigali Amendment, which reinforced climate action. Maud also previously served as a legal associate at the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention on Mercury. And she holds a master's degree in environmental law and a bachelor's degree in comparative law. Along with Maud, we have Judy. Judy is an environmental affairs assistant at the Montreal Protocol Ozone Secretariat. She works on environmental, energy, and climate change matters related to the Montreal Protocol and its Kigali Amendment. And Judy holds a master's degree in energy policy and a bachelor's degree in environmental sciences. Thank you, the three of you, for having us, for being with us in this panel. For starting this panel, I'll be starting with giving each of you a couple of questions, and we can start this discussion accordingly. Maud, I'll start with you. Based on your expertise and your knowledge, what do you think are the contributions of the Montreal Protocol, including the Kigali Amendment, in achieving the climate goals under the Paris Agreement?
Okay, thank you very much, Jana, and also for inviting us to this event and bridging the Montreal Protocol with energy efficiency and climate. So I will focus on the climate implications of the ozone protection, and my colleague Judy will talk more about the energy efficiency aspect. So with the successful implementation of the Montreal Protocol, 99% of the ozone depleting substances have been phased out. And many of these substances are also potent greenhouse gases. So it's estimated by the scientific assessment panel of the Montreal Protocol that this successful phased outs avoided around 0.5 to 1 degree of global warming. But there is always a but. This led to the use of alternative substances, the hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, which do not deplete the ozone layer, but have high GWP value. And they're mostly used in the cooling sector, so in air conditioning and refrigeration, heat pump sector. And the Kyoto Protocol had set HFC reduction targets only for developed country. In the Paris Agreement, which is applicable to all parties, to the agreement did not introduce specific action for HFCs. So basically, the Montreal Protocol expanded its benefits to the climate with the adoption of the Kigali Amendment in 2016. And this amendment introduced control measures for HFCs with phase down targets in CO2 equivalents. So now the Montreal Protocol has more and more climate implications and climate focus, and there is a need for synergetic action with the Paris Agreement. So specifically in the air conditioning and refrigeration sector. So at the level of governments, most of the time, the departments dealing with ozone issues are not well synchronizing the work with departments working on climate issues. But the HFC, for example, production and consumption data that is reported under the Montreal Protocol to the Ozone Secretariat could also be inserted in the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, and also in the long-term low emission development strategies, the LEDs, which are submitted to the UNFCCC. And this coordination between the ozone and the climate officers at the national and international level through HFC reductions and energy efficiency on the refrigeration and air conditioning sector would be facilitated by a coordinated monitoring, reporting, and verification system under the Montreal Protocol and the UNFCCC regimes. So there are also a lot of ozone and climate financial mechanisms that can be combined to phase down these HFCs while also increasing energy efficiency in the sector. And the Multilateral Fund for the implementation of the Montreal Protocol is currently collaborating with the GEF and the GCF and other financial mechanisms and funding institutions to finance HFC reduction and mostly on energy efficient alternatives and policies in the air conditioning and refrigeration sector. And there's also the clean development mechanisms under the Kyoto Protocol that can be used to generate certified emissions reductions from HFC reduction, including relevant to energy efficiency and energy efficient alternatives. There is also the market mechanism under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which allows the trading of GHG emissions reductions, and these credits can actually be generated from HFC's reduction activities. So the challenge here would be to ensure the coordination between the ozone and the climate actors to boost these co-benefits between the Montreal Protocol and the Paris Agreement at all levels, the national and international. Thank you. I'll stop here and hand over to you.
Thank you, Maud. Thank you for sharing all your insights. It's very true regarding the, thank you for pointing out the importance of having a coordination and a collaboration between the different offices, whether it's ozone and climate, in order to facilitate our work and our discussion. Moving forward, I'll pass the floor to Gyuben with a question to you. Based on your experience and as a youth expert as well, what are the youth priorities and their roles in regards to energy efficiency and climate protection?
Well, I guess the obvious answer there is behavioral changes. It's things like closing a fridge door, turning the lights off. But I think going beyond that, you have the potential for young people to train as scientists and as engineers who are able to devise better solutions. And I think that is a critical part of this, not just the simple behavioral changes on an individual level, but we are in a position to shape our futures and to contribute to the world in a way that influences other people as well. So yeah, that's my fairly succinct answer to you.
Thank you, Gyuben. I'll head now to a question to Judy. Judy, what do you think are the implications of energy efficiency when it comes to the context of the Kigali Amendment?
Okay, thank you very much for having me in this panel and the presence of change makers and future decision makers. To your question, so Maud has given a great overview of what the Montreal Protocol and its interlinkage with climate change and other agreements. In terms of energy efficiency, the Kigali Amendment that was adopted in 2016 is encouraging the transition to low or zero GWP refrigerants. GWP here standing for global warming potential refrigerants, and the phasing down of HFCs. and also encouraging the adoption of energy efficient appliance. So I want to thank you first for the presentation you did earlier. It was really targeted. So most of my work will be just echoing what was said during the presentation. We need to create consumer awareness, and that is one of the measures that is being encouraged through Kigali Amendment. We find that most clients, when they go to purchase their refrigerants, air conditioning, and heat pumps, they're not aware of what you're buying. Mostly our decisions are influenced by the price and not what this will impact to the environment. So efforts such as consumer awareness and also tackling a wider scope, a holistic approach, if I should say, of the whole process, from the generation, where we encourage the increase of renewables in the energy mix, down to the production use, and also how the consumer buys or purchases equipment. Now, as I've said, through labeling, customer awareness measures, and also down to the end of life process of how we dispose these appliances. We have found a challenge when it comes to disposal of such equipment because they are just haphazardly dumped and in some cases exported from developed countries to developing countries, which poses a challenge for developing countries who are not able to easily decompose or, what can I say, do away with the HFCs in a sustainable manner. With the increase in global temperatures and the increase in population growth and urbanization, and as was mentioned earlier during the presentation, the demand for these RACHP equipment is increasing, and that will also have a climate impact, both directly and indirectly. But through the Kigali Amendment, we are seeing an increase in adoption of energy efficiency measures, and also in 2022, the MLF Executive Committee encouraged parties, especially from developing countries, to present pilot projects on energy efficiency by availing funds amounting to USD 20 million, so that parties can also see the benefits of such projects in their country. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you for pointing out the importance of energy efficiency measures and for the importance of having a global awareness on when it comes to energy production, to consumerism, to disposal. I'll head now to a question to all our panelists. What do you believe are the synergies with different MEAs and multilateral efforts, including G20, UNFCCC, the CBD? And how do you hope what do you hope to see this year when it comes to these synergies to accelerate climate protection and energy efficiency? You can choose Maud, please start.
Okay, perhaps to add on what Judy said, so the replacement of technologies and in the refrigeration, air conditioning sector, the cooling sector, that's led to a massive disposal of obsolete equipment still containing ozone depleting substances and substances with high GWP levels. So this is often referred as banks of substances or a climate bomb. So if they're not disposed correctly, all these gases can end in the atmosphere. So I think the Montreal Protocol could also benefit and this climate regime from a collaboration with the Basel Convention on the control of transborder movements of hazardous wastes. When these equipment are for this equipment to be disposed in a sustainable manner. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maud. Judy?
Thank you very much. So other than working with MEAs, we all know that we are trying to tackle the triple threat crisis. And to get to the goals that we want to achieve, there is need for a science-based approach and science, evidence to make sure that the decision makers make the right choices. So currently the Montreal Protocol is working with other science panels. Our assessment panel is working with our science panels from the IPCC, from the CBD, to make sure the information that is researched and the reports that are written touch all facets of the environment. And so that's when we come to decision making, especially with the upcoming UNEA 6 and also COP meeting, COP 20, COP 30 under the UNFCCC meetings. The decisions that are made are directly addressing the issues faced by the communities, both in developing countries and also countries with economies with transition, and also encouraging developed countries to push their technologies to the developing countries. So under the Montreal Protocol, we are trying to make sure all the evidence and all the scientific information provided is up to date and solves the situation. Yeah.
Thank you, Judy. Cuban.
Thanks, Jenna. And I think if you think about the history of UNEP as a specialized agency that works with the environmental agreements, you can see that the Montreal Protocol, Kyoto Protocol, and the Minamata Convention are often cited as examples of UNEP's biggest successes. And I think that is certainly true. But then what you realize is that there is no governing mechanism in the UN system for energy. There's a thing called UN Energy. It's more like a network of UN agencies that deal indirectly or directly with energy. That includes UNIDO, Industrial Development, UNEP, UNDP, and a few other. It's a big alphabet soup, as is often the case with these things. So I think there is, at some point, on some level, a need for energy governance at the UN level. This does not exist at the UNFCCCs, and this is something that a lot of youth activists were calling for at COP28 last year in Dubai. So having a dedicated energy governance track at UNFCCC would be one way to do it. At the same time, we saw that there was a huge struggle last year, even to get the tripling renewables and doubling rate of energy efficiency gains language across the finish line. So there are a lot of entrenched interests when it comes to energy discussions, energy governance. And in that respect, I think it is often going to be harder to make a case that it's obviously bad, like was the case with ozone layer depletion and mercury pollution. So I don't have a good solution for you.
Thank you, Given. And personally, as a person who also participated in COP28, I do echo what you said regarding having more of like an energy negotiation track, possibly within UNFCCC, considering the jurisdiction when it's linked to this. So thank you for pointing that out as well. Now we will open the floor for questions from our attendees. Please, you can unmute yourself and ask any question you have to our panelists. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, and my name is Kelvin, and I'm from Strathmore University. And I have a question.
Sorry, can you speak into the mic, please?
Oh, pardon me, sorry. My name is Kelvin, and I'm from Strathmore, and I have a question about energy efficiency and looking into already existing infrastructure and trying to improve on it. For instance, using gasoline formed from capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and electrolyzing water, instead of using going and looking for nickel and cobalt, as we were talking yesterday in yesterday's meeting. Would it be better for all of us really to use the existing infrastructure and not looking for other ways onto improving ourselves by improving on new by using new methods, as I've said, because if you capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and electrolyze it and get hydrogen from water and combine it and get long chain hydrocarbons in any way, shape, or form, wouldn't you otherwise how can I put this? Would you otherwise circumvent the problem that goes around looking for nickel and cobalt and all the legal and social implications that surrounds all of it? And wouldn't it also otherwise be better for atmosphere because you're still capturing carbon dioxide and making good use of it? That otherwise would have still remained in the atmosphere and continue becoming a greenhouse gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Who from the panelists would like to answer that question? Good. Thank you, Maud.
Okay, thank you, Kelvin, for your question. I could try to answer on it. So there are already projects that they call retrofitting projects on energy efficiencies that already address existing infrastructure and try to retrofit them instead of building new ones. But it's quite difficult with alternative substances, for example, in the cooling sector. The substances that are not depleting substances and not global warming, they are running on a completely different system or equipment. So if you replace the substance, you have also to replace the equipment. And in this case, since you have to replace the equipment, why not replacing it with equipment with it, which is more energy efficient? So that's also the challenge here. It's quite difficult to use the same infrastructure when we switch substances. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Maud. We'll take a question from here.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Harun Modena Miesi from Kilifi County of Kenya. For my side, I would not like to share a question, but some few recommendations. Last year, I was lucky to serve as a founding member of Youth Energy Summit. The Youth Energy Summit was the first, it was first launched in Africa, Kenya, for the first time. And from that engagement, there's some key recommendation which I managed to document. And I feel like this is the right platform to share some of these recommendations, mainly targeting the policymakers and also the decision makers. One of the recommendations based from that Youth Energy Summit, whereby more than 1,000 young people across Africa managed to attend, was that a majority of young people requested for investment in renewable energy, whereby government should prioritize investment in renewable energy infrastructure and incentives that development of and adoption of clean energy technology through subsidies, tax incentives, and research funding. Another one is about youth representation and decision making. We should understand one thing, that youth empowerment, it's not a one-time event. Youth empowerment, it's a process, and we need to work with young people until we make sure they are successful. So under this point is that there's a need to ensure young people are being included in the policy-making process related to energy and climate issues, and not in form of a tokenism. Another key point is about international cooperation and collaboration. Something I managed to document that time is that addressing energy and climate challenges requires global cooperation. So there's a need for government to engage in multilateral efforts such as Paris Agreement, promoting technology transfer and capacity build initiative, and also collaborate with other stakeholders, including INGO, business, and academic. I can give a personal example. Around October, I managed to collaborate with colleagues from The Hague and the platform for disaster displacement. And what we were doing is there's a concept known as a knowledge brokerage. We were documenting some best practices of what other young people are doing from the marginal region within Kenya, and kind of share these best practices, experiences, with an aim of inspiring other young people to take active role. Because the main challenge why most young people shy away from this conversation is lack of role model, lack of this kind of authentic knowledge for them to access. Then to finalize, you asked one of the question of specific priorities and role that young people can drive meaningful conversation. One of it, it's about advocacy and activism. So there's a need young people can advocate for stronger policy and take active role in this kind of decision-making table and share this kind of engagement. Another key and
Thank you. We're opening the floor for questions. Thank you. Thank you for your input. We have seat 1023. Who is on that seat? Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So my question is, what do you think is the scope of alternative approach to decrease the energy emissions that we can see now? For example, the place where I have researched, they're using different materials, local materials, and they're using those materials in order to build eco-friendly refrigerator. Like they don't even need any energy to support the structure. So during summers, it stays cool, and during winters, it stays warm. So there is no need of energy. So I just want to know from all of you, what should be the approach to decrease the emission rates? For example, like should it be a hybrid kind of approach where we're incorporating traditional methods and technologies with the innovation, or should we prefer innovation over the existing technologies that we have acquired from our ancestors? Thank you.
Thank you. Cuban, can you take it?
Yeah, sure. I think a few points to reflect on here. First is that what we need at the end of the day is energy services. We don't need energy. We need cooling. We don't need gas, right? We need to deliver the services using energy like media, which include gas, coal, hydrogen, whatever. So the modality of delivering the energy service matters a lot. But at the same time, if you can reduce the amount of service required, that is the first step, right? That is what we call efficiency. And that first step of reducing energy service requirement by designing houses in such a way to maintain a constant livable temperature is one of the it's a very established method, and a lot of indigenous communities still use these. On the other side of the, I guess, like modernity spectrum, you have countries like Singapore who are designing entire regions or like city blocks around, well, to enable a natural wind flow to cool these passively. And there are buildings standards and regulations and codes that encourage this sort of construction. So one of them, of course, is the passive house approach. So literally a passive building that does not require active energy management to maintain a constant state of service provision. Others include LEED, which certified buildings and how much energy they require. So I think there is some sort of balance to be found depending on how much money you have, how much time you have. But I definitely agree that it should be a core principle to reduce the amount of services needed using intelligent design rather than trying to go for technological solutions every single time.
Thank you, Cuban.
Just to add on to what he said, indigenous knowledge plays a key role, especially when it comes to project design, because the people who know a problem are the people who live in that community. So if there are solutions that comes from indigenous knowledge, is highly encouraged. But also on a national scale, we are having countries coming up with maps where we harmonize all the policies. For example, in a region, I'll give, for example, in East Africa, where we have all the countries that are in East Africa are harmonizing their policies so that even equipment is released in the market, the producer has a cost-efficient way to make and manufacture more appliances. And when it comes to the community, everyone is at per the standard. If, for example, with high-level energy-efficient appliance, air conditioning, refrigerator, everyone is able to access such equipment. So such measures are highly encouraged, yeah.
Thank you, Judy. We have seat 1160, question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn from the Kenya Climate Change Working Group. My question goes on the issue of the future of work. So this conversation is happening around young people who are going to transition into the workforce. So we're looking at aspects of energy efficiency and looking at aspect of cooling and heating and developing new technology. So my question goes into how we also ensuring policies, technologies are available for young people to be able to utilize as they enter the workforce. So when this looks at aspects of costs as well. So I want to also understand from the panel how this is being tackled as well. So we can also understand as we transition, as we talk about this energy efficient mechanisms, then how we ensuring also the new workforce are also able to actually utilize this. My second question goes on the aspect that Judy has just raised on the developing countries and also indigenous priorities. So we're looking at heating and cooling as an aspect of energy efficiency, but then how is this going to be available for developing countries? Because we look at aspects of technology availability, costs as well, training. How is this going to look like also for developing countries? Is this a priority for them on aspects of energy efficiency? Is it solely on aspects of cooling and heating, or is it, say, clean cooking, for instance? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Maud, can you take one of the questions?
Sure. So there is actually an increasing financial aspects that could address the energy efficiency. For example, the Multilateral Fund of the Montreal Protocol last year approved a funding window for developing countries of $20 million for energy efficiency pilot projects. So there are quite accessible mechanisms for developing countries that are financed also by developed countries to enable the access of energy efficiency technologies, training of technicians to install these equipment. So this is from the Montreal Protocol perspective, and I guess also from the climate, as I mentioned, the climate regime, there is also access through project proposals by developing countries to these kind of technologies. I hope I answer at this part of your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Maud. Judy, would you like to add, please?
Yeah, sure. For the Montreal Protocol, we don't tackle issues beyond the RACHP sector, but this I'll address just as my knowledge from an energy experts. We have in the Global Climate Fund and Global Environmental Facility, I think, if I remember the acronym correctly. They provide funding for such projects that incorporate both energy efficiency and other environmental concerns that are in a community. So in terms of workforce, they are able to train the said community, because you can provide technology to a place where they don't need the said technology. So they have the chance to work hand in hand with the immediate stakeholders who are in need of such technologies. I don't hope I have answered your question. Well, I have tried to answer your question.
Thank you, Judy. We have seat 1006.
Hi, my name is Agnes. As we all know, the ozone is depleting. So my question is on first, I not want to lay blame on anyone, but the members of the UN Security Council are the biggest pollutants. They enjoy veto power and being member states of the USC. So most of them are doing nuclear tests. And there's a lot of wastage and emissions that are leading to this ozone depletion. And most of them, in terms of military prowess, they are so huge on that. So during the military test and of course, war and the impact of war and the use of nuclear energy, how are we regulating these countries to not using excess power and nuclear tests in some of these countries that one are less developed countries or developing countries? And because at the end, the ripple effects are that they'll go somewhere, do test, the impact of war times is inevitable, but they do not pay for the impact in terms of environmental damage and nuclear emissions, and the emissions are left in land and water. And most of the times it leads to health concerns, especially from people who can't speak for themselves. And it takes a lot of activism, even as they are requested to respond to those people because they enjoy veto power, they tend to ignore. So how do we talk to, or sorry, how do you make the UNSC members respond to this? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Judy, can you take this question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Currently, the ozone layer is healing. And why it's healing is because we have been able to phase out ODS, ozone depleting substance. These are the CFCs, the chlorofluorocarbons, and HFCs, the hydrofluorocarbons. The Kigali Amendment works to phase down the HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons. Now, on the issue of nuclear tests, that is not handled under the Montreal Protocol. However, it's true, there are environmental impacts that can be associated to nuclear energy. I will not touch on that directly. However, I feel that it's necessary for every country to look at the resources they have available at their disposal and make the right renewable energy mix. Now, for countries in developed countries, nuclear energy has been considered a source, but such matters are handled by the International Atomic, so when it comes to such matters, I hope other experts can be able to give a clear scope of how environmental and energy impacts that can affect the people. Yeah. So maybe you can try. Yeah. I'll leave it at that, not just to speak too much on the nuclear issues because we don't have any nuclear energy in Kenya, but I feel that the matter can be addressed and all issues can be brought forward to the relevant parties that will be attending the UNEA meeting.
Thank you so much, Judy. So we have time for 3 more questions. Okay, I see a lot of hands. So let's do Theo and the gentleman in the front, and then we can perhaps take you because we haven't heard from anyone from the right side. And then after the session, you can still engage with the speaker. So very sorry, we cannot take all of the questions, but please feel free to go ahead.
Thank you. So we're talking about action at international level, but typically the funding available to developing countries is incremental. It's not meant to fully fund a transition, it's meant to begin one. And so my question is, where does the private sector come in this? And how can this community specifically influence that discussion?
Thank you for the question. Who would like to take this question?
So just to clarify, the question is, how can the private sector help developing countries enhance energy efficiency?
Yes, I suppose it's how can they be invited into the process in a more substantive way?
Well, okay, so especially in the past couple of years, one of the key questions in the financing sector for developing countries or across the world has been the cost of capital. It's expensive to borrow money in developing countries because they are perceived as more risky. So this is what we call the country risk premium. And what this means is that it's far more expensive for an entrepreneur in Kenya to start a business than it is for an equivalent entrepreneur in, for example, Germany or the US. Now, financial institutions are not in the business of losing money for the sake of it. That is sort of the opposite of what they try to do. And I think a really interesting thing that is being done in many development banks and multilateral financial institutions is blended capital or hybrid capital. And what that is basically is you've got the MDBs, the multilateral development banks, who are backstopping or guaranteeing or de-risking investments by the private sector. So you've got different layers of loss absorption when it comes to investments. And MDBs can be the fallback for private sector investors to provide some support and lower the cost of capital. So it's not on the same order of magnitude or the same scale as what the private sector can muster. But if you can provide some assurance to these private investors that these projects will pan out to some degree or other, and they are insured to some extent from losses, then that goes a long way in helping them, well, in encouraging these private institutions to invest further in developing countries. So I think that's one of the biggest and most important strategies we are seeing deployed at the moment.
Thank you, Gubin. Maud?
Yeah, maybe just to add on this, the financial mechanisms of the Montreal Protocol, when well, it works when countries make project proposal to these mechanisms, and the country at the national level involves already the private sector. So it can, for example, propose a pilot project to change the refrigeration system of a full supermarket, for example. So in this case, it's collaborating with the private entity. So it's a full, like, these kind of project proposals and funding, they are done involving a wide range of stakeholders. So it's include the government's representative, the private sector representative and associations to implement the project on the ground. That was just to add on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maud. All right, so yes, please.
Right. Thank you very much. My name is Moses Kamal. I am among 5 eco-champions leading one campaign, one global climate campaign agenda. Now, Juan, you've talked about, to quote you, the COP28 Global Renewable Efficiency Pledge has committed parties to doubling their global average, blah, blah, blah. Miss Judy, you've talked about energy efficiency requires investment. What we do at One is that in the fight of our lives, we are keeping world leaders accountable by adequately checking and publishing the receipts and raising our voices for those who cannot. As we speak right now, climate change, and we're talking about Africa, is costing Africa up to 15 billion annually. That's more than the individual GDP of 26 African countries. By 2050, this will be upwards of $50 billion. Cyclone Freddy in Malawi, 2 billion in damage, 1 million people displaced. In East Africa, 20 million people, of course, facing acute hunger. Due to historic droughts, climate change made the drought 100 times more likely. Let's not talk about Libya and Storm Daniel. My question is, I seek a reflection from the panel because from where we sit, there is a problem with climate finance reporting. It's in a mess. The question is, how do we fix it? And I ask that because of 2 things. Liz, one is that 2/3 of the climate funding promise either hasn't been delivered or has gone into priorities other than climate change. And Africa is spending more to pay back its debt to rich countries than they receive in climate funds. We believe that this is an injustice, and we have the data to prove it. So we are saying that climate finance reporting is a mess. How do we fix it? And mine is to just seek a reflection from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I will turn it to you, Gilbin.
Okay, so I thought the title of the session was about energy efficiency and the ozone layer, but I'm happy to talk about climate finance, sustainable finance all day, every day. But I'll keep it very, very short in the interest of time. It's obviously not fair to make the most indebted countries pay more just to pay down the interest rather than the principal, because you're paying more just in interest because the interest rates go up and cost of capital goes up. There are a lot of not so good solutions to this. I think things like the Bridgetown Initiative and debt forgiveness and debt restructuring are some of the most obvious existing system ways to do it. I'm not sure it addresses the root causes of this, which is that the international financial architecture is skewed in favor of the countries that have money, because money begets money. And if you don't have money, you don't end up with more money magically. So I'll spare everyone a diatribe. But we do have at the Children and Youth Major Group, we are launching a white paper on sustainable finance, and we have launched the Sustainable Finance Youth Coalition to pursue these discussions with young people and to understand how the international financial architecture works, why it's broken, and how we can address the systemic inequalities, inequities within it. So I hope that provides some response to your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Gilbin. And it's good that you mentioned about the Sustainable Finance Youth Coalition as well. It's a new initiative that they are setting up. So keep an eye out if you're interested in sustainable finance. It's definitely worth joining. Judy and Maud, is there something you would like to add on this? Okay, all right, let's move to the next question. I remember there was a hand from here. Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Simali Dixon Odweri. I have two questions. So the first question is, what economic mechanisms are the most effective? To what economic mechanisms are effective to encouraging business and investors to invest in the renewable clean energy? And also the second question is, what are you doing, or what is implementation on encouraging the rural appropriate technologies to ensure that there is full 100% transition into clean energy?
All right, thank you for your question. Any one of you would like to take this question first? Yes, Maud, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I think what has come up in most of the projects that were submitted through a financial mechanism is that private entities are actually interested in changing their, for example, cooling systems, because the energy efficient aspects of it enable savings from the company in energy consumption. So on the long-term basis, of course, these mechanisms can help cover the upfront financing parts of it. Replacing a full equipment costs a lot of money that companies may not be able to afford. So this is why the funding can help them to finance this transition. And on the long-term basis, it's actually benefiting them, as I said, from the energy efficiency aspect and energy savings on the costs. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Mood. Just to add on to what Mood said, cost remains a big concern, especially in rural areas when it comes to energy efficiency and renewables and matters as such. Governments are encouraging policies, financial incentives, either through taxes or private sectors that are coming up with ways to finance consumers to purchase or to be in a position where they can be able to access renewables and energy efficiency appliances. I have a case example for Ghana. Ghana launched a project where they allowed the consumer who is not able to purchase energy efficient appliance, they're coming to buy the said appliance, which is considered energy efficient, labeled at a 5-star rating, but the charges of the appliance is put on their salary scale. So every month, a certain amount is deducted from their salary, and thus you find now all the community is able to access this energy efficient equipment, and that has an impact now again to the energy grid, because now people are using energy efficient appliances, the energy demand decreases, and now the government can concentrate on finding energy renewable sources to add on the grid to produce energy, a clean source of energy. So the main one of the issues to tackle or to increase renewable in the energy mix is to ensure demand comes to a sustainable level or decreases. And that's why I think during his presentation, he said buildings and energy efficient appliances are being encouraged and adopted. Yep.
How about the last question? On what are you doing to make sure that there is stakeholder inclusivity in terms of rural appropriate technologies? Like you move to Mombasa, you'll find it's a very hot region, and therefore they require fun each and every time. And for example, and I'm a local person from Mombasa, and I develop my own technology maybe as an alternative from that. How do you ensure that there is stakeholder inclusivity, that I'm in the race of competing into the $20 accelerators program? Like, for example, like inside here, we have students maybe they're in fourth years, their final years developing projects. Like, do you have links? Do you have? Yeah.
I think that falls under climate finance docket. What I know since the increase in demand of energy is increasing, and as you mentioned, maybe you live in Mombasa and the climate or the temperature is very high, the governments are encouraged to build or encourage the community to build buildings where you have an access to maybe free-flowing air. So those are ways, indigenous ways, and as I mentioned when I was answering this question, indigenous ways where solutions are being given to the community based on the problem of the community. In terms of technologies being invented and how to finance such projects fall under the climate finance. I think currently there is, I'll have to get back to you at the sidelines, I've forgotten the right name, where the county governments in Kenya, for example, are working with communities to identify, I think, projects and how to fund such projects on a county level scale. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. All right. Unfortunately, we won't have time for more questions. You're always welcome to engage with the speakers after the session, but it is so great to see so many active engagement coming from our youth attendees.
Can I have one that is urgent, kindly? One question that is very urgent.
So we're very, very short time. Next session is starting in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Yes.
unfortunately, we need to move on to the next session.
Maybe
But
I just wanted to talk about this because we are in a youth forum and the youth inclusion is very important. And you realize that we have a very serious issue, even with the inclusion of the youth when it comes to
Sorry, I really do
qualification.
apologize. We have speakers waiting like behind, so we really have to wrap this up as soon as possible. I do appreciate your understanding. Jana?
yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for being really active and being really engaged in this session. So let's give a big round of applause to all of our speakers and also to Gilbin, to Maud, to Judy. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the Ozone Secretariat. And thank you all for your valuable contributions.